Moscovia has appropriated the name Russia, which in its geographical, cultural, geopolitical, ethnic sense fully corresponds to the modern term Ukraine. Ukrainian people became a victim of probably the biggest cultural robbery in human history. Ukraine's most prominent historian Mikhailo Grushevsky point-blank said, "We are a nation whose name was stolen." Moscovia stole the name Russia and got us all fooled. Such a bold claim would require some unwavering evidence, which is exactly what I'm going to do in this video. I will present all evidence required that would support my bold claim for you to have no doubts this is so. And I'll start by teasing you with a quote by Karl Marx, which you probably didn't know he ever said. "The origin of Muscovy lies in the bloody degradation of Mongolian slavery, and not in the rude heroism of the Norman epoch. Modern Russia is nothing but a transfigured Muscovy." Amen to that. My name is Yaroslav, I'm from Ukraine. Welcome to my channel where I bust Moscow myth one at a time. So what exactly did Moscovia steal? They stole the name of the medieval state called Rus and all the subsequent variations of this name. Russia, Russia, Ruthenia, spell however you want it. These are all exonyms stemming from one root. Rus. Exonym means a foreign name that natives don't use. Germany, for example, is an exonym for Deutschland. And Japan is an exonym for Nihon. Russia is a Greek exonym for Rus. Russia and Ruthenia is a Latin exonym for Rus. The theft officially happened in 1721 when Peter the Great renamed the entire state of Moscovia into the Russian Empire. It was not a natural renaming that usually lasts for centuries. It was a deliberate and artificial rebranding. By the will of one person, Muscovites have become Great Russians. Tsar has become an emperor. Listen to a history professor of Yale, Tim Snyder, confirm this rebranding.
The new Russian Empire, as it's called, from 1721. And by the way, Russian Empire is a conscious rebranding exercise, right? It's called Russia because of Rus.
Together with the name Rus, they have appropriated the history of Rus, its culture, its prestige, as Rus was once a great empire on par with Byzantine one, while Muscovy didn't even exist. If we look at Moscovia's origin, we see that it was born as a vassal to the Golden Horde and paid tribute to them until the very 1700s. So just some 300-ish years ago, there was no Russia. There was Moscovia paying its last tribute to the Crimean Khanate. It's just like Karl Marx said, the origin of Muscovy lies in the bloody degradation of Mongolian slavery, which does not sound like something to be proud of. They were embarrassed of their origin story, so they decided to cover it up. I'll quote a Ukrainian doctor of historical sciences, Yaroslav Dashkevich. Muscovites essentially appropriated the name Rus. This gave it, albeit fake, but still the brilliance of cultural, civilized state with an ancient historical tradition with Byzantine Kiev church metrics. And also by appropriating the name Russia, Moscovia can also act like those territories belonging to Rus are rightfully theirs. Muscovia denies Ukraine exists. In its imperial self-destroying hatred, they are doubling down on Ukrainians, destroying our memorials, cancelling our language, burning our books, dismissing we have the right to exist, and falsely believe that we live on the territory of the holy origin, Russia. How did they steal it? How did they manage to fool us all? Well, first of all, let's remember who we are dealing with. They have mastered Photoshop to bend the truth to their will before Photoshop even existed. Muscovites are expert in deceptions and lies. Only reason they have failed to cover Chernobyl was because of international involvement. They did, however, manage to hide another third largest nuclear disaster in the world, Kishtim. Just not so long ago, we were witnesses to how their state-run doping program was exposed. Watch an Oscar-winning documentary Icarus on this subject. Muscovites still deny they have shot down MH17, while international court undeniably proved it was their missile. Putin, 2 days before the invasion, said that they're not going to start a war. The point I want to make is that Muscovites are systematic liars.
You know, the war which we are trying to stop and which was launched against us using Ukraine.
That's why no agreements with them are worth the paper they're written on. In 2014, they have invaded Ukraine. They have annexed a territory of a sovereign independent state by staging a fake referendum where there was even no checkbox to vote to remain as part of Ukraine. Their absence of dignity allows them to rip off the patches from their troops and just deny it was their troops. I'm gonna make a video analyzing in detail how exactly their propaganda works and affects people. Meanwhile, if you're curious, watch my video how Moscow uses popes as undercover KGB agents, and check out my video What Russia Really Is to see just how deep the rabbit hole is. Regardless, Muscovy is not getting away with stealing Russia's name. Invading Ukraine has sped up the inevitable collapse of empire with its lies. More and more people are becoming interested in the history of this region, uncovering more and more clues that shatter their lies. One such clue we can see right now if we go on Wikipedia. When the Mongol invasion destroyed Rus and burned Kiev in 1240, western part of Rus persevered, and on Wikipedia this western part of Rus is called Kingdom of Galicia-Volhynia. But here's the weird part. If we read a little down the line, we quickly learn that it was historically known as Kingdom of Ruthenia. And while Ruthenia is a Latin exonym, the true Latin name of this kingdom is Regnum Russia. This name appears on many historical maps over western territories of Ukraine. We see this name on the seal of the king Rex Russia. We see it on the coins Moneta Russia. All meanwhile, 1,000 kilometers from Kingdom of Rus, there is a country that's undeniably called Moscovia, that is minting coins with Arabic script on them, and their tsars wear hats with Koran scriptures. A very inconvenient part of history for Muscovites that shatter their lies that Moscovia being direct successor to Rus. So they rewrite the history that downplays the significance of the Kingdom of Rus. In fact, they even give it a different name. Also, if you've noticed, Rus on Wikipedia is for some reason listed as Kievan Rus, also an artificial name created by Muscovites to imply that there was more than one Rus, which there wasn't. So back to my original question, just how exactly did they manage to pull it off? How did they manage to get away with stealing a name? Well, as history is written by the winners, after rebranding, Muscovites were really busy rewriting history, as so to destroy evidence that contradicts their narrative and to fabricate new one that legitimizes it. Catherine the Great, who came after Peter, did exactly that. She created a commission for compiling notes on ancient history, mainly Russian, the sole purpose of which was to attach to a newly rebranded Moscovia a pedigree derived not from Mongols, but from the Norman kings of Rus, Rurik, Helgi, Ingvar. Those kings were ruling from Kiev and are believed to be Vikings from Scandinavia. That's why Marx said Russia of the Normans disappeared completely from the scene. Indeed, such Rus disappeared completely, only for Muscovites to dig out its corpse 4 centuries later and start pretending like it's still alive within them. So the commission created by Catherine had a lot of rewriting to do, and they started with collecting all historical documents and archaeological evidence they could get their hands on. As they had control over the most territories of former Rus, it was a fairly easy thing to do. Thousands of documents and artifacts were stolen from Rus Ukraine and relocated to St. Petersburg, the new shiny capital of rebranded Moscovia, built on the bones of Ukrainians. After 9 years of colossal falsification effort, in 1792 the commission produced a new history of Moscovia, where they converted Ugro-Finnic tribes into Slavs, Muscovites into Great Russians, Ukrainians into Little Russians, and laid the foundation to their history prevalent to this very day. So the hardest part was done. All that remained was to enforce their new history and protect it from questioning. So throughout the centuries, Muscovites had many more of such commissions, constantly adapting and readjusting history to fit their needs. One such commission exists right now, called Commission for Historical Education, led by Putin's trusted helper Medinsky. But check this out, in 2012 there was another such commission, and you'll never believe what it was called. Presidential Commission of the Russian Federation to counter attempts to falsify history to the detriment of Russia's interests. Yeah, I could have not imagined a more self-exposing name. It's just like the Ministry of Truth in the novel 1984, an agency that controlled history, as those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. The wisdom of George Orwell. Don't you think it's cute that his book was banned in Soviet Union? That was their instruction manual, basically. But check this out, it gets even better. The chairman of this long-name commission is Sergei Naryshkin, who happens to be the Director of Foreign Intelligence Service. He's also the current head of Russian Historical Society, founded all the way back in 1866. So their head of intelligence and their head of history is one and the same man. Yeah, I would at least give this guy history as a hobby. Anyway, lastly, in this segment of how they got away with stealing a name, I would like to add that 300 years ago, when it happened, it was impossible to fact-check them. You couldn't just go online and see scanned copies of evidence you had in question. Not to mention, getting access to historical artifacts from Moscow to study them was impossible either. On top of that, Moscovia was rich on resources that everybody wanted, and in a way behaves like China today. You support pro-democratic protests in Hong Kong? Bang! Your access to the markets in China are banned, NBA. I think that's why Elon Musk is such a Putin pleaser these days. He needs those cheap resources for Tesla to make bigger profits. Anyway, add to this the fact that they are professional liars, and you end up with the result we have today. Everyone is calling Muscovites as Russians. Yaroslav Pelensky from Harvard Ukrainian Studies in the 80s released his work where he states that people just believed them. Muscovy's assertions that it succeeded to Kiev by right of inheritance were accepted by a large number of historians as a matter of fact, beyond the limits of permissible inquiry and critical examination. Critical examination is exactly what I'm going to do in this video. But for now, I hope I explained clearly how exactly they got away, so I can move on to my favorite part, actual evidence. Facts exposing their lies that they couldn't destroy. Let's look at all maps predating the rebranding and see just how exactly the territory of modern-day Russia is labeled. But before we do that, for the maps to make more sense to you, I have to explain really quickly where Ukrainians come from. We are the direct descendants of Ruthenian people who lived in Rus. We are not nomadic people like Turks or Hungarians that came to new territories. Despite Moscow's colossal efforts to assimilate us, we still preserve a lot of Russian identity. Our coat of arms, the trident, is the family crest of Russian ruler Volodymyr the Great. Our flag colors, blue and yellow, are the same ones as the colors of Kingdom of Rus. Our currency is named Grivna, the same name of a currency that was in Rus. Fun fact, ruble means a chunk of grivna, from the word rubati, which means to cut. So if you cut grivna, you get rubles. The Ukrainian classic look involving one earring, a unique haircut called oseledets, and big mustache dates all the way back to Russian ruler Sviatoslav, and Ukrainian Cossacks look just like him. Compare that to any Muscovy ruler, Ivan the Terrible for example, completely different. Ukrainian language is also the closest language that was spoken in Rus. So natural renaming has occurred. I'd imagine similar to how Romans have become Italians or how Gauls became French. Which, by the way, Greeks still call France as Gallia. And actually we also have some people identifying themselves as Ruthenians living in Ukraine, majority of them being beyond the Carpathian Mountains. So most likely the natural renaming didn't reach them in isolation. Why the renaming of Ruthenians into Ukrainians took place is unknown, but it probably has something to do with the name Ukraine itself. Nobody knows what Ukraine means exactly, but the most prominent theory is that it means inland, a sort of homeland. UNV means in. That's why on some maps that we are about to see, you will see Ukraine spelled through the V, Vkraina. The remaining part, Kraina, means country. So, literal translation from Ukrainian is in country. The word Ukraine was first mentioned in the 12th century Kiev Chronicle in the context of regional ruler dying and that Ukraine was mourning him a lot. I'd be thrilled to go more in depth about the origin of the word Ukraine, but for the purposes of this video it's enough to say that term Ukraine is an old one and used all the way back in Russia. With this knowledge at our disposal, let's check out the old maps. In the Figma file project, I have assembled dozens of old maps, all of them marked by the date they were created, by the name of the author who created them, and by the country or nation that they were produced in. Link to this project will be available in the description, so you can get yourself acquainted with those maps yourself. Working in this Figma project is really easy. To navigate left and right, you have to hold space, and to zoom in, you have to hold Ctrl and mouse scroll up and down. So instantly we land on the map, 1690, made in Amsterdam, and we see Moscovia, to where current Russia is, and then where there is Kiev, we see Ukrainia, and then where there is Lviv, the western Ukrainian city, we see Russia. So fascinating example of how the actual name Russia is on the territories where Kingdom of Rus persisted for 2 centuries after the Mongol invasion. Let's move on to the very first map, which was made in 1154. This map has completely missed Crimea. It has Kiev as Kyiv, and we see the words Russia, Galicia, another western Ukrainian city, the river Russia, and another mention of the word Russia on the territories of Ukraine, of course. Another map we see right here is Lviv, Leopolis, and the western parts of Ukraine are called Rossiya. And where there is Moscovia, it has Tatar signs. 16th century map, German map, oh beautiful, it says Moscovia, Russia Alba means White Russia, right next to Kiev, Moscovia, and then again next to Lviv we have Russia. Another map where there is Lviv, we see Russia, and Lviv is the most western, biggest city in Ukraine. Herberstein, a really good read that one is, we see Moscovia, and we don't see actually any other names here. You could imagine how difficult it was to make those maps back then, and how most of them have lots of errors, lots of mistakes, but the key important fact here is that we look at the tendency. And the tendency is that western parts of Ukraine are called Rossiya because this is where Kingdom of Rus was. And where there are coins with Arabic scriptures, we see Moscovia. This is the tendency. Moscovia Nova Tavlova. 1580, the first map where the name Ukraine appears next to Kiev, French map. 1595, Germanic map, and we see Moscovia. And then where there is Leopolis, we see Russia, right? And then we see Kiev. Moving on, let's see what's here. Moscovia. I guess you see the trend that I'm going for. Everywhere where there is Moscovia, there is Moscovia. Everywhere there is Ukraine or Rus, there is Rus. For example, right here is Lviv, and right there it says Russia. And there are lots of those maps. Again, Moscovia, Russia, where there is Lviv, Kiev, Chernihiv. By the way, I also marked Chernobyl for somebody who wants to find them. Chernobyl is a really old city. This is an upside down map. We also see Moscovia where there is current Russia is, and we see Russia where there is Lviv. Completely opposites. Once again, the map that is flipped, and we see where Leopolis there's Russia, and when there is Moscovia where there is actual Russia right now. Map of Europe, a very interesting map. We see the word Vkraine appearing on the western parts, Cossacks, Ukrainian Cossacks, Moscovia, the Sea of Moscovia, and the actual Siberia is called Tartaria. There's actually a conspiracy theory saying that there was this country Tartaria, which nobody knows existed. Another map, we see Ukraine, the land of the Cossacks of Zaporizhia. And then we see Moscovia being mentioned a lot of times. We see also Ukraine, the land of the Cossacks, dependent on Muscovy and stuff like that. Once again, Moscovia, and where there is Leopolis, we see Russia Rubra. Russia Rubra means Red Rus, which basically this exonym for Kingdom of Russia. Okay, this is the map I've already mentioned, and this map is interesting because it was shown to Putin.
Там нет Украины. Да.
Эти земли просто входили в состав Речи Посполитой, а потом попросились в состав Московского царства.
And they both couldn't find Ukraine existed here, although it says it right here. Ukraine, the land of Cossacks. Muscovites are really something. They can't even find Ukraine when it's written there. By the way, Putin has confirmed that Ukraine was part of Muscovy Tsardom. Here's a unique map where it says Muscovy state in Cyrillic. I guess Muscovy wasn't bothered with making maps back then, but we actually get couple maps that say in Cyrillic, part of Muscovy state. And right here actually says in Cyrillic, Red Russia next to Lviv, and actually it has Ukraine in green and another part Russia right here. So we see Russia and Ukraine running in parallel. Beautiful. Another map that says Ukraine and then Moscovia. There's lots of those maps, and then there goes rebranding. So after rebranding, we will obviously see much less Moscovia appearing because they are enforcing their policy to be called with the new name Russia now, but we still see the name Muscovy persevering for a century or so before it catches up. Here's on the map of London, we see Red Russia next to Lemberg, that's the name of Lviv in Germanic. We see Kiev, we see Ukraine also appearing there, and of course we already start seeing Russian Europe appearing after the rebranding. But here's the gem, here's the cherry on top, the icing on the cake. There are two French ethnic maps, and we see on one there is Ukraine and Ruthenians, also known as Little Russians right here, and there are Muscovites, and we see lots of tribes, Muromsk, Moldavians, Medeks, Chuds. Basically, the Muscovites are not even Slavs. And another beautiful map, 1868 by Casimir de la Mare, where we see Muscovites, originally Turk or Finks, and language is Slavic. And we also see Rutheans, Slavs, living on the territories of Ukraine. But the most beautiful thing about this map is that Casimir de la Mare has text explaining this map, and the most interesting part lies right here. Between Muscovy and Poland lie the Russians, whose name the Muscovites usurped by conquering them. I have made the translation of his text from French to English down below. Another map by Casimir de la Mare where he mentions Ukraine and Rutheans running in parallel again, which is important because this is how the renaming takes place. There is a period of time where both names apply to the same group of people, Rutheans and Ukrainians, and we see this proved on the maps. And of course I've collected a few other maps, but they're not of greatest significance here because the further away from rebranding we get, the more and more Muscovite lies take hold. Also in this document I have a second page called Docs, where I am collecting another relative documents to the rebranding, and we see lots of evidence from all kinds of people, all kinds of countries. Some of that is in Cyrillic, some of them is not. One important thing I would like to show you is to disprove Moscow myth that they have never called themselves Moscovia. Right here we see Moscow ruble that says in Cyrillic Moscow ruble. We see actually their ruble that says in Latin Moscovia. We see their newspaper that says right here Moscow State. So they've been calling their country Muscovia too. There's lots of evidence for that, lots of evidence for that Muscovites were not able to destroy. So anyway, I'll remind one more time to go and check out this project to explore the maps for yourself. Lastly, I would like to address the preposterous title of Moscow Tsars, as they had self-proclaimed themselves to be Tsars of All Russia. Best way to refute that would be to read from Antonius Posavini's work The Moscovia from 1587. If we go to the page 61 and zoom in, Grand Princes of Muscovy refer to themselves as Lords of All Russia, even though much of what they call Russia is in the hands of a Polish king. Ivan, when writing to the Turks, on occasion ordered himself called Emperor of Germany as well. When coveting Livonia and casting an eye on Prussia, Ivan claimed that he was descended from a brother of Augustus Caesar. Yeah, so as you can see, anyone can title themselves literally with any nonsense. I can title myself the King of Mars if I wish to. While it was common for kings to put in their titles the name of lands, territories they have conquered, for example, name Russia was also in the titles of Polish, Hungarian, Lithuanian kings. Title alone does not give them any right to claim the name Russia. Besides, their title is a blatant lie. They were not controlling all of Russia back then, and I think you can hear the Antonius Posavini's surprised to the audacity of their lies. Lying is the core attribute of Muscovites. It's their foundation. I think the more accurate title for Muscovite Tsars would be Tsar of All Russia wannabe. I think I came up with a good analogy to illustrate the situation around the stolen name. There was a province of Britain within the Roman Empire, where Londinium arose. The same way there was province of Vladimir Suzdal within Rus, where Moscovia arose. Both of those provinces were conquered and were paying tributes to their capital, one to Rome, another one to Kiev. Needless to say, both of them had completely different ethnic people living there. However, the key difference between Londinium and Moscow was that after the collapse of the corresponding empire, Moscow became a vassal to another greater power and had a unique privilege to collect tributes on behalf of Mongol Han, which helped them grow so rapidly to the power they are today. Karl Marx has another good quote about that. In the terrible and abject school of Mongolian slavery that Muscovy was nursed and grew up, it gathered strength only by becoming a virtuoso in the craft of serfdom. Even when emancipated, Muscovy continued to perform its traditional part of the slave, as well as the master. So Muscovites claiming themselves as Russians would be identical to British calling themselves Romans. Yet again, with one key difference: Brittany hasn't controlled Italy, nor tried to wipe them out from existence. Ultimately, why does it matter if Moscovia falsely claims to be Rus' successor? I mean, there's Wallachia calling itself as Romania, directly deriving its name from the Roman Empire. However, Romania is not trying to destroy Italy and not acting like Italians should not exist. Current Russia, on the other hand, is not keeping the past behind. It's not moving on. And not because they don't want to. It's because they can't. Expansion of their empire, lies, meddling in others' affairs, serfdom and puppeteering, disregard for individualism and human rights is the very foundation of their very existence from their very birth as a slave within the Mongol horde. That's why they invaded Ukraine, to preserve themselves, while being the richest country on earth in terms of natural resources, while having the most amazing opportunities to prosper and grow. They are acting right now in the self-destructing ways, because they just can't act otherwise. Acting otherwise would imply them being democratic, them respecting international law, upholding human rights, which would be acting against their fundamental core. That would mean letting go dozens of nations they have conquered: Chechnya, Dagestan, Siberia, Sakha, Buryatia, and so on. That would mean to return Karelia to Finland, Kuban and Crimea to Ukraine, Amur to China, Smolensk to Belarus. That would mean that empire would fall, that their lies would fall, and that their historically accurate name Moscovia would be back on the map again. See, they just can't let that happen. Putin in the past year has expressed fear Russia turning into Moscovia twice. Naturally, they are subconsciously afraid that their foundation will crumble. But it is the only right way forward, for the sake of all humanity, including the very people living in the current Moscow Empire, who are robbed of freedoms, wealth, and individualism. It's our job to defend our democracies that are a threat now, and that will always be a threat as long as there is Russia on the map. It's our job to help them destroy that anti-humane foundation, on the basis of which they're justifying genocide against Ukrainians right now, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago. And the best way we can start destroying that foundation is by calling them by their historically accurate name, Moscovia. There is nothing shameful or belittling about that. Sooner or later, the time will come for them to embrace their history, to open their KGB archives, to open their stolen historical archives, to live through the pain of this new realization. In Ukraine, we already have a successful petition to officially start calling them Moscovia again. So it's just a matter of time to reverse that artificial rebranding. Calling Moscovia by their stolen name, Russia, makes it okay to falsify history, makes it okay to lie, makes it okay to claim that Ukrainians shouldn't exist. After all, Kiev is a Ruthean city. It was the capital of Rus. Calling Muscovy as Russia means legitimizing their crimes. I urge you, my viewer, to take a decision right now, and from this point forward, to stop referring to Moscovia as Russia. This will be a tiny baby step towards progress, towards justice, and human prosperity. Another tiny baby step would be to share this video so as to start raising awareness around this subject. Whew, that was a long episode. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for staying until the end with me. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'd be delighted to address any questions you might have. I am for history that's based on evidence, not myth. I'm for a healthy discussion in the comments on this complex subject. Please also help Ukraine armed forces any way you can. Even $1 would do. They are right now at the spearhead that is working to break that anti-human Muscovite foundation. Ukraine is restoring the international law, which is the best way forward for all of humanity. And Ukraine desperately needs your help, as the opponent is really formidable. In the description below this video, I'm going to provide 2 PayPal emails of volunteers that I trust. Arkady Babchenko, who fled from Moscovia and now is helping Ukraine armed forces on the medical part, saving lives. And there is Serhiy Starnenko, a Ukrainian volunteer who specializes in helping with more lethal aid. So you have an option to choose where your money would go. I've spent hundreds of hours making this video, looking through thousands of documents. If you feel like my work had some value to you, please consider donating to those volunteers. Thank you so much again, and until next video.